Ever notice how the moment you stop chasing, they start chasing you? It's not magic, it's psychology. The less available you are, the more valuable you become. You were never too much. You were just too accessible. And the second you choose yourself, the second you stop begging to be seen, that's when they finally look. Because when you're unbothered, you're not just walking away. You're leveling up, and trust me, he feels it. Now the question is, will you keep shrinking for love, or finally make him rise to meet you? When we say scarcity increases value, we're not just talking about economics, we're talking about psychology, especially in the context of relationships. Human beings are wired to notice and desire what they perceive as rare, elusive, or not easily available. The principle applies just as strongly to people and emotional availability as it does to diamonds and luxury goods. When something, or someone, is readily available at all times, it's easy to overlook, take for granted, or assume will always be there. But when that same presence becomes limited or less accessible, we begin to pay more attention. We wonder why it's no longer at our fingertips, and suddenly we assign more value to it. Not because it has changed, but because our perception has. In relationships, especially romantic ones, this plays out in very subtle but powerful ways. Imagine someone who is always present, always saying yes, always responding right away, always available. At first, it may feel comforting, even flattering. But over time, that constant availability can make the person seem overly eager, less mysterious, and less exciting. Without realizing it, the receiving party may start to feel less drawn in, less challenged, and more in control of the dynamic. The allure starts to fade. On the other hand, if that same person begins to draw boundaries, becomes less available, and shows signs of independence and self-prioritization, it shifts the dynamic. Suddenly, their attention feels like a privilege rather than a given. This subtle scarcity re-engages interest because it disrupts expectations and forces the other person to work for connection rather than passively receive it. The psychology behind this is often rooted in our instinctual drive to pursue what we feel we might lose or what we believe has to be earned. When someone seems slightly out of reach, our brain interprets that as a challenge. Challenges are stimulating. We become more alert, more invested, more curious. We wonder why we're not getting the same amount of attention, and our natural response is to figure out how to regain it. This dynamic is not about playing games or being manipulative. It's about recognizing the unconscious value we place on things we believe we could lose or don't fully possess. Scarcity, when genuine and not artificially forced, signals high value. It communicates that you have other priorities, that your time and energy are not handed out freely, and that you are not seeking validation. That quiet confidence, that sense of autonomy, makes others lean in. It's not the detachment itself that attracts. It's what that detachment represents: strength, confidence, independence, and emotional self-sufficiency. People want to be around those who are whole on their own, not those who cling or overextend in an attempt to be liked. When you are selective with your energy and measured in your availability, you naturally create a sense of scarcity, and with it, an undeniable increase in perceived value. Emotional detachment, when healthy and intentional, is often a powerful reflection of self-worth. It doesn't mean shutting down emotionally or becoming cold and indifferent. Rather, it involves setting clear boundaries and not allowing your emotional state to be dictated by the behavior or approval of others. People who are emotionally detached in a healthy way show that they are not desperate for validation or connection. They are open to it, but not dependent on it. This kind of emotional posture is compelling because it communicates a deep sense of inner stability and self-respect. When a person becomes overly emotionally invested in how another thinks, feels, or reacts, it creates a dynamic of imbalance. They begin to measure their value based on the other's responses. Every message left unread, every delayed reply, or every minor shift in tone can send them spiraling. This vulnerability often stems from insecurity or fear of abandonment. But when someone steps back from this cycle and practices emotional detachment, It shows they no longer need constant affirmation to feel okay with themselves. They still care, but they no longer need to prove their worth by trying to fix, chase, or control someone else's behavior. They allow things to unfold naturally, which often commands more respect than frantic overinvestment ever could. A person who detaches emotionally does so because they understand their own value. They've likely learned, either through experience or self-reflection, that their peace of mind is not worth sacrificing for someone who cannot meet them where they are. This kind of detachment becomes a quiet act of self-preservation. It says, I am enough as I am. If you want to be in my life, show up. If you don't, I won't collapse. There is strength in that. Emotional detachment also protects against being manipulated. When someone is too emotionally enmeshed, they're more easily influenced, more easily guilted, and more easily led into situations that don't serve them. But detachment creates space between stimulus and response. It allows for clarity before reaction. It puts self-respect ahead of impulse. This behavior isn't rooted in arrogance. It's rooted in a grounded sense of identity. When someone detaches, they're not trying to make a statement. They're simply acting in alignment with their values. They know that their emotional health isn't something to be bartered. They won't beg to be understood. They won't fight to prove they're worthy. Instead, they stand back and let people show them who they are without force or persuasion. That calm detachment can be incredibly attractive because it reveals someone who isn't looking to be saved, fixed, or constantly reassured. In a world where many people are driven by insecurity and emotional overinvestment, emotional detachment becomes a marker of rare self-awareness. It sends a message that your emotions are your responsibility, and that while you may welcome connection, you do not rely on it to define your worth. This quiet self-assurance often shifts the entire dynamic of a relationship because it invites others to either rise to meet you or fade away. Either way, your peace remains intact. Desire is a complex and often unpredictable emotion, but one truth remains consistent across human behavior. It rarely flourishes in certainty. When something or someone is completely known, accessible, and predictable, desire tends to fade. The brain, wired for novelty and challenge, becomes less engaged when there is no mystery to solve, no unknown to explore. It's in the spaces of ambiguity, in the moments when someone's thoughts or feelings aren't fully transparent, that our curiosity deepens. This uncertainty activates a psychological tension that fuels longing, fantasy, and emotional investment. In relationships, especially during the early stages, uncertainty plays a crucial role in creating that emotional spark. It's not just about playing hard to get, but about leaving enough room for imagination. When someone isn't entirely sure where they stand, or when they feel a mix of signals, attention in one moment, distance in the next, they begin to focus more intensely. Their mind loops through questions. What did that look mean? Why haven't they replied yet? Are they losing interest or just busy? These questions are not comfortable, but they are powerful. They create a mental loop, and in that loop, desire simmers. This dynamic doesn't just apply to new attraction. Even in long-term relationships, moments of uncertainty can reawaken desire. A partner who maintains their own interests, has a life outside the relationship, and doesn't always reveal every thought keeps a certain level of intrigue alive. This doesn't mean being secretive or emotionally unavailable. It means retaining a sense of individuality that resists complete emotional merger. When everything is exposed and predictable, passion often cools. But when a person remains slightly unknowable, slightly out of reach, desire is given space to breathe. The paradox is that people often crave stability and connection, yet it's the lack of complete emotional certainty that keeps the fire alive. When there is nothing left to discover, the motivation to pursue or to stay deeply engaged can decline. This is why desire tends to reawaken when distance is introduced. After time apart, after a challenge, after a shift in emotional energy, people often report feeling more attracted to their partner. It's because they re-experience a sense of mystery, of longing, of not having full access. and the brain responds by reigniting interest. Uncertainty taps into the part of the human psyche that equates effort with value. If something is not easily secured, we assume it must be worth more. We project our desires into the unknown, and in doing so, we often idealize the other person. That idealization isn't always rational, but it's emotionally compelling. It keeps people engaged, attentive, and emotionally alive in the connection. Too much certainty too soon can unintentionally dull attraction. When every feeling is declared immediately, when every intention is broadcasted, when there is no time for emotional tension to build, desire can diminish. It's not about withholding affection or being emotionally distant. It's about understanding that desire needs a little bit of space to stretch, a little bit of uncertainty to thrive. The unknown invites pursuit, and in that pursuit, desire finds its home. Over-pursuit in relationships is one of the most common yet least understood behaviors that quietly erodes attraction. While it may come from a place of genuine interest or affection, constantly chasing someone can lead to the opposite of the intended effect. Rather than drawing a person closer, it can actually push them away. This happens because attraction is not just about emotional availability. It's also about balance, mystery, and mutual investment. When one person is doing all the initiating, all the texting, all the giving, it creates an energetic imbalance that makes the other person feel smothered, overwhelmed, or simply disinterested. When someone is over-pursuing, they often don't realize they're sending an unintended message. They may think they're expressing love, dedication, or consistency, but what they're really signaling is that they are placing the other person on a pedestal. This kind of dynamic undermines a sense of equal footing. It communicates neediness, desperation, or insecurity, even if those feelings aren't actually present. The more one person pushes, the more the other instinctively pulls away. This is not manipulation, it's human nature. People are drawn to what they perceive as valuable, and when someone is constantly available and trying too hard, that value seems to diminish. There's no space left to wonder, to miss, or to initiate from the other side. Attraction thrives when both people are mutually engaged. If one party is doing all the emotional labor, the chase becomes one-sided, and with that, attraction begins to erode. The person being pursued may begin to feel pressure rather than pleasure. They may feel that they haven't had time to develop their own interest, because someone else is already emotionally miles ahead. When there is no room for natural progression, when one person is always 10 steps ahead emotionally or physically, the connection can feel forced rather than organic. Over-pursuit often stems from fear of losing the person, fear of being rejected, fear of not being good enough. But the irony is that the very act of chasing in an imbalanced way often leads to the outcome that was feared in the first place. It causes the pursued person to devalue the connection because it feels too easy, too certain, or too clingy. They start to wonder why the other person is trying so hard, and whether that effort comes from genuine connection or from a deeper insecurity. Healthy relationships are built on reciprocity. When effort is returned in equal measure, it builds mutual respect and desire. But when one person is constantly proving, convincing, and initiating while the other simply receives, attraction fades. The key isn't to play games or pretend to be disinterested. It's to stay grounded in your own self-worth. It's to allow space for the other person to come forward, to miss you, to make effort, and to choose you of their own free will. When someone over-pursues, they don't give the other person the chance to desire them. They only give them the experience of being overwhelmed. And when that happens, even the strongest potential connection can lose its spark. In any relationship, there is a constant, often unspoken exchange of emotional energy. This exchange shapes the dynamic between two people, and the balance of power plays a significant role in determining how attraction, respect, and desire unfold. When one person is always giving more attention, more effort, more emotional vulnerability, They often begin to feel depleted while the other becomes passive, disengaged, or even dismissive. But when the person who has been overinvesting finally pulls back, something interesting happens. The entire energy of the relationship begins to shift. This isn't about manipulation or punishment. It's about realigning yourself with your own value and breaking a pattern of imbalance. When you pull back, you send a message, whether consciously or not, that you are no longer willing to carry the weight of the relationship alone. You stop overextending, stop chasing, stop filling in the gaps where the other person has gone silent. That withdrawal isn't necessarily cold or cruel. It's simply a boundary. And in that moment, the balance of power begins to even out. The person who had become comfortable with your constant availability is now faced with your absence, your silence, your stillness. That pause creates space for awareness. They begin to feel what it's like to not have your energy readily available, and often that absence speaks louder than any words ever could. This pulling back re-centers you in your own emotional power. Instead of operating from a place of fear, fear of losing them, fear of being alone, you begin to operate from a place of clarity and strength. You show, not through force but through silence, that you are not dependent on anyone's approval or attention to feel worthy. That kind of self-assuredness disrupts any dynamic where the other person was coasting or taking your presence for granted. When you stop running towards someone, they have to decide whether they value you enough to meet you halfway. And if they don't, the silence reveals everything. Pulling back doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring about yourself more. You stop giving in to the emotional habit of over-explaining, over-apologizing, or over-efforting. You no longer try to manage someone else's feelings or reactions. You let them experience the natural consequences of your withdrawal, the quiet, the distance, the change in rhythm, and very often, this triggers a shift in their behavior. They begin to reach out, they ask questions, they attempt to re-engage. Why? Because the certainty of your presence has been replaced by uncertainty, and in that uncertainty, desire and awareness are reborn. The most important part of this process is that pulling back isn't a tactic, it's a truth. It's a reflection of an internal decision to stop giving your power away. When you recalibrate the emotional dynamic by stepping back, you allow the other person the opportunity to rise, to reciprocate, or to fade away. And whichever they choose, you remain grounded in your own strength. The balance of power shifts not because you forced it, but because you stopped tipping the scale against yourself. True attraction goes far beyond surface-level charm, physical appearance, or fleeting emotional highs. It is sustained and deepened by something much more substantial, mutual respect. When two people genuinely respect each other, attraction gains depth, strength, and resilience. It moves from being a temporary emotional or physical pull to something more enduring. Respect creates a foundation where both individuals feel seen, valued, and safe to be their authentic selves. It's not just about admiration. It's about recognizing the full humanity of the other person and choosing to honor it. Attraction without respect is often unstable. It can lead to infatuation, obsession, or fantasy, but it doesn't survive the reality of a long-term connection. Without respect, one person is often idealized or objectified, while the other may be diminished or overextended. In contrast, when respect is mutual, both people are free to grow, to express themselves without fear, and to stand their ground without being dismissed or devalued. That sense of equilibrium fuels genuine desire because it affirms that both individuals are equals in the dynamic. There's no power game, no chasing, no one trying to prove their worth. Instead, each person values the other not for what they can offer or how they make them feel in the moment, but for who they are at their core. Mutual respect also fosters emotional safety, which is essential for vulnerability. When someone feels respected, they are more likely to open up, to share their fears and dreams, and to connect in a meaningful way. That kind of openness deepens intimacy and makes attraction more than just a reaction. It becomes a bond. It's not just that you want the other person, but that you admire who they are, how they move through the world, and how they treat others. And in return, You feel valued not just for your appearance or your availability, but for your integrity, your thoughts, and your boundaries. True attraction cannot thrive where one person is constantly compromising themselves to keep the other interested. It can't survive in environments where one person feels they have to shrink, perform, or chase. Respect sets the standard for how attraction is expressed and maintained. It ensures that the connection isn't built on control, fear, or insecurity, but on recognition and equality. When two people respect each other, they naturally want to give, not to win affection or secure commitment, but because giving becomes a reflection of care and appreciation. The presence of mutual respect also means there's room for disagreement and individual differences. You don't have to agree on everything or operate in the same way. What matters is how those differences are handled. Do you listen when the other speaks? Do you validate their experiences even when they differ from your own? That respect creates a container in which attraction isn't diminished by conflict. It's strengthened by the ability to navigate it with care. And that's what makes attraction not just intense, but sustainable. Because when you truly respect someone and they respect you, desire becomes not just an emotion. It becomes a choice you continue to make day after day.